You're listening to the Pithy Chronicle. History with a bite. I'm Caroline.
And I'm Erica. And we bring you history's dirtiest deeds, dripping with sarcasm.
Are you hungry yet?
Welcome back, Pithy listeners. It's Erica here with my fabulous cough that still won't go away.
Shoo, shoo, go away, said Caroline, the other person in this podcast.
And today we are going to talk about some not very bright rulers. I don't want to call them stupid.
I do.
A lot of them were highly educated.
There's stupid and then there's just stupid.
Not all friends have all gifts.
You're way too nice on this one, Erica. You usually are more judgmental than this.
Oh, I'm
happened?
going to be judgy later, but I'm trying to be a little nicer.
There's street smarts and then there's book smarts. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and then there's just plain old common sense, which is
lacking?
really missing here.
Okay.
Yeah.
The 5 dumbest rulers, a la Erica.
Yeah, we're going to start with Tsar Nicholas II.
And he would be top of my list, too.
I wanted to slide us in with somebody that's fairly notable. This is one who definitely had the book smarts. Don't look at me like that. He was highly educated. Now, did he apply any of that?
No.
No.
No, he was
Not at all.
Pretty dumb.
He is the last Tsar of the Russian Empire, and arguably one of the worst leaders ever to sit on the throne.
Agreed.
He was young and fancy-free, and listen, I hate mustaches, but that one is not a bad one.
No.
Not a bad one.
It's not a pedophile stash, as you do sometimes see.
Yes.
Ooh. If you don't have enough hair to make a mustache, the half-ass attempt is sad.
If you don't look like George V.
If you don't have a Tom Selleck, don't bother.
Yeah, gross. Anyway, highly educated, didn't really turn that into anything, much to his father's chagrin.
As I understood it, he was highly educated but didn't get good grades.
Fair enough.
People kept stuffing the information in his face.
And praying, God, let it work.
Praying!
But he didn't, except for that whole autocratic thing, blessed by God.
Mm-hmm.
Really believed that one.
To be fair, they'd been telling him since the cradle.
Exactly.
2 plus 2 equals 4, and God put
blessed
you here.
you. He wanted to live this young military officer life where he had a lady in every port. He enjoyed the pageantry of being an officer and being in charge of the military. And he loved his military friends. But he also sucked at being a military officer, as we will see. Yeah. Now, he does have a very famous love match to one of Queen Victoria's granddaughters, Alex of Hesse. And Alex, again, highly educated, a favorite of her grandmother's because her mother died very young.
Yeah.
Alex had everything put before her and was Empress of all Russia and literally did everything possible wrong.
She could not make a right decision.
Neither of them could.
No.
Neither of them could.
Let's see. Does this give me instant gratification or will it kill millions of people?
And it starts from their wedding.
Mm-hmm.
During the coronation, there was this free food and gift to be given out to the serfs who were able to come. This will become the infamous Katinka Field. Thousands upon thousands gathered on the day, but due to lack of organizations, thousands were wounded or killed. Like, it was just Black Friday. They were trampled to death.
Literally stampeding over each other.
Yeah, exactly.
It had rained. It was really muddy, and people were literally falling in this field.
And drowning in the mud. Instead of going to see the wounded, which allegedly they wanted to do, Sergei, the uncle, was like, don't you go.
You never apologize.
You are infallible.
Even if they died trying to see you.
God's will, blah, blah, blah. And they listened.
Idiots.
They listened and did not go.
And this is talked about as a posthumous prophecy that from the day they got married, Alex of Hesse brought death.
Well, and at the wedding, part of his ceremonial garb fell off.
Oops.
Everyone's like, this is a harbinger of doom, blah, blah, blah. The next big thing that goes wrong for him is the Russo-Japanese War. And oh boy howdy, does it go wrong.
Oh boy howdy.
It should have been an easy freaking win for Russia.
It should have.
But it was not. Big upset. Definitely not expected.
It was an upset because the number of people, obviously, a force 10 times the size should win. But why did he not win?
Because instead of just taking a small loss, he sends the Baltic fleet over and they sink the entire fleet.
Ouch.
There is one boat left.
That's real bad. Wow.
Not only have you killed a ton of serfs, which the Imperial Russians, they don't really care about, but losing to Japan?
That's embarrassing
Huge
for
deal.
Nicholas. And it's very early in his emperorship.
Yes, we are still right at turn of the century. There is a lot of industrialization going on across Europe. And Russia just can't keep up.
Nope.
They just can't.
They had too far to come.
Mm-hmm.
And the rulers still felt like really they should get to make literally every decision, even if they weren't well versed in, like farming techniques or military strategy.
Irrigation.
Supply chain.
In every opportunity, Nicholas relied on the wrong advice.
Mm-hmm.
If he was supposed to be listening to an advisor, he thought for himself. If he was supposed to think for himself, he was leaning on the wrong advisor.
Murphy's Law. What can go wrong will go wrong.
Mm-hmm.
That man had the Murphy curse.
Yeah. We have the rise of Marxism, a result of hugely unhappy workers in this poor industrialized system, and they believed they could overthrow the Tsar and create a proletariat. And in 1903, they split into the Bolsheviks, which will eventually massacre the imperial family, and the Mensheviks.
Who were a little less feisty.
less killy.
Murderous.
Then you have Bloody Sunday, which comes up on January 22nd, 1905, just 2 years later. Approximately 20,000 workers and their families go to the Tsar's Winter Palace, and they are there peacefully, appealing to the Tsar, the little father. We're your people, and we're suffering, and we love you.
You're our father.
Help us. Tsar Nicholas II could have gone out to the balcony, wave a little bit, and said, hey, I'm so sorry you feel that way. Send me people to chat with. Probably nothing will change, but people would have been felt heard, and we could have probably
said hi to Nicholas's descendants right now. But we can't.
There are
none.
None direct. The generals did not relay that piece of information, and so the top soldiers were told to open fire, and more than 1,000 were wounded and a few hundred killed. It was absolutely devastating to the imperial throne. Because then, just a year later, the Duma was set up.
Kind of like their House of Representatives.
And having a Duma
was already problematic.
It was already problematic because the Tsar was like, you're causing too much issue. I'm done with this. I am the Tsar.
Again, he had the opportunity to listen and probably not make major changes, but at least listen. And he chose to literally silence them.
Cannot emphasize enough how much just pretending to listen would have helped him. So much.
But did he?
No, he did not. He listened to his wife.
Oh, good. I bet she was given a great education in terms of statecraft. Did she learn a lot about government and politics and the people? And
no.
Did she even learn Russian?
No, she did not. She continued to speak German.
They spoke in German.
Yeah.
So did their children. Come on, guys. That's just dumb.
At this point, the court language is still French, so they were speaking French and German and not Russian.
It makes the people feel really heard when their monarchs speak in foreign languages.
It's even said that he had such an excellent English accent and spoke English regularly that people thought he was an Englishman.
That is not a great thing in Russia.
When he married Alex, he disregarded everyone's call to say, please God, not a German. The anti-Prussian, anti-German sentiment was incredibly high at that point.
I think the other issue is that Alex, as a person, just really was not
Made no effort.
suited to be an empress. She did not have the temperament for it. She wanted to be with her children and never really leave the safety of a compound. She was incredibly naive, and she was a terrible choice.
She really made no effort to endear herself to the Russian people.
No. Because God put her there, so why should she?
This is all culminating to entering World War I in 1914. Nicholas made the decision to drag Russia into World War I, but they were not ready.
They had no supplies. None.
And instead of sending people who are competent and meant to do the job and have, done this their entire life, he says, no, I'm going to the front.
And while I agree with his sentiment that the leader should be there to offer moral support and to show that he is a part of the effort, you don't actually lead the decisions.
Yeah, if he would have gone out in his fabulous uniform
and given great speeches.
Fantastic. Good for you. But that's not what happened. And back home, his wife was not prepared for this and was very much under the influence of a religious zealot, Rasputin. The populace did not like him because he was shady AF.
He was a sex-crazed moron who literally didn't bathe for months on end and was using the royal family to serve his own drinking and pleasure. He'd abandoned his own family, and he's telling women that sleeping with him, pleasuring him, will get them back into heaven.
Yeah.
That's horrifying.
In March 1917, women led a citywide strike, and over the next 5 days, riots formed and workers were swarming the streets saying down with the autocracy and the war, and the soldiers initially obeyed orders to shoot them, but then they were like, maybe we shouldn't be doing this.
Maybe we shouldn't shoot our people.
And they ended up turning on the imperial family, and they were apprehended by the Bolsheviks and then put to death.
It was a terrible end. Violent and brutal. The girls were wearing corsets filled with diamonds, and so the bullets ricocheted off.
Mm-hmm.
The parents died right away, but the girls ended up being stabbed to death.
Yeah, with the bayonet.
They also killed the dog and a couple of the servants. They went too far.
The whole thing was overkill.
Mm-hmm.
But had Nicholas and Alexandra been a little more reasonable...
Yeah, he is an idiot.
Just incredibly unsuited to be an emperor.
He could not force himself to make decisions that were smart, even if they didn't feel good to him.
Well, and even...
Like, give up some of your power, and yeah, it doesn't feel good, but you won't die. He just couldn't make that decision.
The philosopher Trotsky said that Nicholas II was not an adequate enough leader to run a post office.
Well, no, because he was really bad at supply chain.
So now we're going to move to another Russian, Peter III. More famously, Catherine the Great's husband.
Ish.
Yes, of course, ish. He was the grandson of Peter the Great.
Mm-hmm.
Big shoes to fill.
Literally.
Literally. He was a very tall man.
Huge.
Very big shoes.
6'7" or something?
Quite large.
Yes.
Peter's foreign policy and his decision-making skills were so out of touch with what the general population was and his predecessor, Empress Elizabeth.
Mm-hmm.
That was really his downfall and the rise of Catherine. The critical event we're going to be talking about is the 7 Years' War, 1756-1763. Empress Elizabeth really did not like that Prussia and England were getting buddy-buddy.
Too close for comfort.
And why would they do that when Great Britain and Russia are supposed to be friends right now? Frederick the Great was just a consistent pain in the butt.
Mm-hmm.
Things were going really, really great. Elizabeth was crushing it, about to defeat the Prussians and win back a ton of land when she died.
Oops. Hate it when that happens.
So, who do we get in her place?
Ooh!
Go.
The idiot nephew.
Yes. She really didn't like him because he was a Prussophile, so he loved Prussia, loved Frederick the Great. He had this toy soldier army, which we'll get into in a little bit, and he modeled them after the Prussian
good. I'm glad
ones.
we're going to talk about that one.
Of course we are.
And he had his uniforms. He dressed as a Prussian officer.
Mm-hmm.
Despite being the Emperor of Russia.
Yes.
Prussia's main enemy.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
That would be like if the President of the United States started wearing a Russian uniform to work.
Exactly.
It would be real weird.
It's not at all what you want from your person.
It ain't.
And what happens next is known as the second miracle of the House of Brandenburg. Did you think we were going to get miracles in this episode? Because I did.
I did not. It would be miraculous if these people managed to make a miracle happen.
So, basically, the second miracle of the House Brandenburg is when Elizabeth dies and Peter takes over.
Oh.
Peter at once recalled all of the Russian armies from Berlin and mediated Frederick's truce with Sweden. And so the Russians advanced into Prussia, was absolutely poised to
take it,
crush the Prussians, yes. But mysteriously, before all of the mediation happened, the Russian general withdraws, and the probable reason is the disagreement between the royal Russian family. The Empress, Elizabeth, hates Prussia, but Peter, as we said, Prussophile and admirer. her health is frail, so the generals are kind of in this position. She's the empress, but she's on her last leg, man.
So if we listen to her, then we might end up right along with her.
Exactly.
When she dies.
This stalling with the generals, coupled with her death and the mediation with Peter III, is this miracle that happens. Prussia is given back all of the land that Elizabeth had taken.
They just gave it back.
Just like that.
We're really sorry.
I'm so sorry.
So sorry. See, the last ruler didn't like you, but
really
you guys are great guys.
Now, Peter was born in Germany.
Mm-hmm.
He had grown up in the Prussian courts. And his wife, Catherine, who was such a better Russian than he was,
because she spoke the language,
was in fact German. He was a Lutheran.
Was he?
That's how he grew up.
Was he forced?
He was forced to do it.
To get the throne?
Mm-hmm. But Catherine was a true believer.
Yeah.
It was for really real.
When Catherine went with something, she was full bore.
Exactly.
Here we go.
Peter is emperor. He's married to Catherine, and they hate each other.
Hate
with a blind passion.
He murders animals in front of her to intimidate her, and she looks at him and sees a child trapped in a still pretty small man's body.
A pubescent. He preferred drinking and playing practical jokes and then having his toy soldiers, who were actual people and used actual ammunition in their Prussian outfits.
They were actually killing each other, weren't they?
Yes, he opened fire, active live fire, on Catherine.
Wow.
Probably hundreds of thousands of lives lost. Gives back valuable territory to their arch nemesis. And then this little thing called a coup happens because Catherine is a savvy politician who also happens to be sleeping with the Orlov brothers.
She's sleeping with people that are interested in actually sleeping with her.
Yes. She was sleeping with the real generals and the real power players at hand, and she was like, I can do this a whole lot better. And so she does.
And
he subsequently had an accident.
Oh, I hate it when that happens. When you're imprisoned and then there's an accident.
There's a whoopsie-daisy.
Oh, gosh. Especially when the whoopsie-daisy involves being strangled.
And also involves your wife's lovers.
So he died.
He died.
Because of his own
general ineptitude.
Is there any discussion about some sort of mental illness for him?
There is a lot of discussion around that because he's just not all there.
He's just not. I'm going with mental illness.
Yeah. So now we're going to move to someone absolutely despicable, George IV.
Oh.
By the time that George comes to the throne in 1830, he was almost blind, addicted to laudanum, and consumed great amounts of brandy to help ease this pain from his obesity and blindness and the fact that he's hooked on drugs.
All I can think of is hooked on phonics.
Hooked on phonics works for me.
Yep.
Hooked on laudanum works for me.
I have heard it argued that George IV would have been a good king had he come to the throne 30 years earlier.
Yes.
That in the Regency era, he wasn't so bad as regent.
Yes.
But by the time he finally came to the throne, because his mad father actually died instead of just being incapable for 2 decades, he was beyond help.
Yeah.
The Hanoverian fathers and sons had this well-known hatred. Every Hanoverian father hated his son.
It's almost like the Windsors with divorcees.
It is. And every grandson and grandfather got along, so it was every other generation. And so from the beginning, he just was miserable in his relationship with the current king and his father, and he just could not overcome.
Yeah, he was very interested in fashion and women and having fun. He was really more interested in doing that than being the Prince of Wales. His father, George III, did not like him, as you said, and even went so far as to try to keep the prince away from the 5 younger brothers so that they might not fall into his debauched bad habits.
Because until George III went mad, and he did go mad probably from a disease called porphyria, until he went mad, he was actually a very faithful husband, an upright guy, quite straight-laced. And his son was, well, not.
Not. Throughout his life, George gambled and accrued eye-wateringly huge debts, had a ton of mistresses, one who he married in secret, and, oh my gosh, made his dad so pissed.
Oh, yeah.
Charles Greville, who was a contemporary, says, a more contemptible, cowardly, unfeeling, selfish dog does not exist.
Ooh.
Everything except his duty was done to excess, and when he finally died, the Times newspaper did not even pretend that the populace was grief-stricken.
That's a good one.
Let's talk about this secret marriage to Maria Fitzherbert. She was a Catholic widow, of course, very much the
Church
no-go.
of England or
And
nothing.
Maria was a commoner, not the legally required Protestant bride, and certainly not approved by royalty, had nary a penny to her name. And they needed this dynastic marriage. So his father forced him to then get out of this marriage to marry Caroline of Brunswick.
Which, let's just say that not all Carolines deserve this bad name.
I don't really think she was that awful. I think she just was put in a really bad situation.
She was supposed to be very unattractive.
No, not unattractive, just not clean.
Oh, right, she didn't
Just a
bathe.
little dirty. George III instructed George IV he needed a royal bride. And on the day of his wedding, all of his debts of £600,000 would be cleared.
Right.
This was it. You get out of debt, you marry a royal bride, and we're good.
Yep.
So the younger George just sent a short note, like a post-it note to Maria being like, hey dude, sorry, gotta get these debts cleared.
I just can't afford to marry.
So Caroline was never classed as beautiful, but she was incredibly popular despite her appearance and poor hygiene.
Many of us Carolines do bathe.
You do. I'm so proud.
Thank you.
They did meet once before they actually got married, and they detested each other. George was so drunk, he was unable to stand without support
At his own wedding.
at his own wedding and had to be prompted by his father to speak his vows.
Poke in the back.
Yeah, and she thought his portrait was too flattering, aka, you
Yeah.
are not cute.
He used a 10-year-old pic on his profile.
He spent their entire wedding night drunk by the fireplace, but they must have at least slept together once to get Princess Charlotte. He claims it was just 3 times.
How fertile of him.
George changed his will after Charlotte arrived. So he had the heir, even though she was a girl. In it, he basically was like, you know what? My wife, not a virgin on our wedding night.
You don't spill those beans.
He's like, yeah, you know, we're married. You gave me a daughter, but you weren't a virgin on our wedding night. And you know what? You're only getting a shilling when I die. 1 shilling.
That's pointed. Like when you put a tip down of 10 cents.
Mhm.
Your service was so bad, I'm making a point. It's rude.
It's pointed because then he left all of his other property to Maria Fitzherbert, who he claimed was his real wife, and then the couple quickly separated after that, because public sympathy lay with Caroline of Brunswick for having to suffer the indignity of George as a husband. Jane Austen even commented, poor woman, I shall support her as long as I can because she is a woman and because I hate her
I
husband.
thought Jane would have been more eloquent, but okay. One of my favorites.
Charlotte was raised in her own household away from her parents, and it was not a happy childhood. She bore the brunt of the tug and war for their affections.
They both wanted her, but didn't necessarily want to be with her. She was a prize.
And George paid for Caroline to leave England.
Get out.
He would not even allow her to come into the coronation. It was a ticketed event, and as she was the royal bride, she got to process with him to the cathedral, but then was not allowed in because he wouldn't give her a ticket to her own coronation.
I've never heard that. He denied her a ticket to her own coronation?
Technically, they were supposed to be
Jointly.
and she could not attend.
Mm-mm.
He continued to put the crown in debt, shame his wife, ignore his daughter.
Whom everyone was so excited, but she died in childbirth, and so that's how we end up with Victoria.
Eventually, William does take the throne for a short
William
amount
does
of
take it
time,
first, but every little thing that he did right in this world, specifically Charlotte,
everything good and great about
everything
him.
good deteriorated or died.
It takes until Victoria to pull the crown out of this trouble.
I'm actually going to argue that it takes Albert.
Yeah,
them
fair
out.
enough.
It was not
Fair enough.
Victoria. It was Albert.
No, I don't think Victoria would have been very good without Albert.
No.
Charlotte has died. Her son did not survive. George had this huge memorial erected in her honor, and his critics were basically like, this is a show because you just feel guilty that you didn't pay her enough attention in her life and refused to go to her in her final days.
Oh.
George wrote to the Pope, my kid's dead, but did not trouble himself to inform Caroline. So she found out about Charlotte and her grandson by chance as the letter for the Pope passed through Italy en route to the Vatican.
Oh, that's terrible.
Yeah.
That's too far.
The royal baby race of 1818 then began. His brothers were like, oh crap, we have to impregnate our wives because we have...
Because there were how many brothers?
It's a lot of brothers.
5, 6 brothers? Plenty of choices, and none of them could create an heir. Some of them were off being debaucherous with too many women to settle down. Most of them. Some of them had died. They just weren't interested in settling down.
3 of his brothers became fathers to help raise the British spirit. This royal baby race.
Oh, gosh.
Britain's population blamed George for her demise. George was horrendous and continually caused panic with his political decisions, but it was his personal life that just cemented him as this
idiot,
really debauched human.
That's true. It's not that he couldn't rule, it's that he couldn't contain his personal life to the point where it impacted his ability to rule.
Because when he wasn't on drugs and in a miserable marriage,
he was capable.
He was capable.
But I think the world just weighed him down. His father weighed him down, and then he got into the drugs, and there's just no coming back from that.
It really is.
Especially when they didn't understand just how debilitating they can be. He had promise early on.
Yeah.
But no.
Now let's go a little farther east to Muhammad II of Khwarazm.
Whom I have never heard of.
Well,
I'm ready.
In 1218, a small contingent of Mongols crossed the border in pursuit of an escaped enemy general. Upon successfully retrieving him, Genghis Khan made contact with the Shah. And having only recently conquered 2/3 of what would one day be China, Genghis was looking to open trade relations. But having heard exaggerated reports of the Mongols, the Shah believed this gesture was only a ploy to invade his lands. Genghis sent emissaries to Khwarazm. Reports vary. One said it was 100 Muslim merchants, others state it was 450, and even some say that it was 3.
Oh, okay.
To emphasize his hope for a trade route.
Okay.
The Shah, in turn, had one of his governors, which ended up being his uncle, openly accused the party of spying. Their rich goods were seized, and the party was arrested.
Oops.
Trying to maintain some sense of diplomacy, Genghis sent an envoy of 3 men to the Shah to give him a chance to disclaim all knowledge of the governor's actions and hand him over to Genghis and the rest of the Mongol horde for punishment, because that's not very nice.
An emissary is supposed to be treated differently than any kind of attacker.
The Shah, though, executed the envoy again, and then immediately had the Mongol merchant party, Muslim and Mongol alike, put to death and their goods seized.
Oh dear.
I want you to tell me what you would have done in this situation. I'm not going to tell you what happens next until I hear your feelings.
Well, I would not have murdered the envoys. If I was suspicious, I might have jailed them, put them in a nice prison until we could confirm.
Even a palace, but under house arrest.
A nice prison. And then I would have probably sent an emissary of my own, a brave one, I guess. But I would not have provoked by murdering the envoys, because Genghis, I think at this time, had a very well-earned reputation for brutality and retribution.
Well, if they would submit and pay...
Yeah, it was not a problem.
Initially.
Yeah. If you went along with it...
Yeah, whatever.
He's not going to kill you if he doesn't have to.
Yeah.
But if he has to, he's going to.
So these events led Genghis to retaliate with a force of 100,000 to 150,000 men.
As I said, could be brutal.
Crossed the Jaxartes in 1219 and sacked the cities of Samarkand, Bukhara, Otrar, and others. Muhammad's capital city, Urgench, followed soon after.
So, because we murdered a few envoys, important people, and then treated Genghis rudely, villages, cities, multiple, are razed.
And the capital.
And the capital are razed to the ground.
Yes. When all you had to do was
be nice.
Open trade routes. He wanted to open a trade route with you.
That equals money.
2/3 of China.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money.
That's a lot of silk.
It's a lot.
It's a lot of porcelain and gunpowder. They had good stuff.
Good stuff, man.
Paper.
Good paper.
So he's clearly not able to look beyond the here and now. He's not a big picture guy, Muhammad.
And because he was not a big picture guy, he lost his empire and it got absorbed into Genghis Khan's.
Did he murder Muhammad?
No, Muhammad ended up dying in disgrace. He fled and sought refuge throughout Khorasan and later died of pleurisy on an island in the Caspian Sea.
What did he die of?
Pleurisy. It's a chest cold.
So not poisony.
No, not
Pleurisy, poisony.
Same.
But you know what? Genghis wouldn't poison someone. That doesn't send a message.
No, just slit his throat.
Okay, well, not the brightest bulb in the box.
No. So let's talk about, and this is a little teaser for our newest season, Women at War.
Yay!
We're going to talk a little bit about a man who was incredibly stupid.
I'm ready.
Because of his stupid life choices, I cannot find a single article just about him. He only exists because of what was done to him by Olga of Kiev.
What was done to him? I hope to God I don't go down in history for what was done to me. That can never be good.
No, I want to be the
I
doer.
really don't want to go down as a victim.
Prince Mal of the Drevlians. The Drevlians were a Ukrainian tribe that originated in the 6th century AD, and by the 10th century they were a client state of the Kievan Rus, Viking-descended principality that covers parts of modern Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia. But the Drevlians are most famous for their faithful decision that led the wife of a Kievan Rus prince to becoming Saint Olga of Kiev.
A saint.
A saint.
Interesting. I know some of her deeds, and they don't feel saintly.
They're not saintly,
No.
but holy cow.
Here we go.
It all started when Olga's husband Igor, Grand Prince of Kiev, arrived in the Drevlian capital to demand tribute, like a tax, because the Drevlians were a client state of the Kievan Rus.
Right. It's a tale as old as time.
Should be fine, right?
Yeah.
No. The Drevlians, particularly Prince Mal, felt that his demand was too high, so they just executed him.
Oops.
Reportedly by ripping him in half.
Oh, that's a death.
Apparently, they took each leg and arm to a bent down tree and then let him go swing.
Oh.
Yes. Prince Mal was then like, that means Olga's single and ready to mingle. And they were really hoping that Olga would be like, yes, you tore my husband in half.
Come here, bad boy.
Marry me and expand into this Kievan Rus territory.
I totally want you to now not only take my husband, but also my power.
Take it from me.
Nah.
They miscalculated how that was going to go over.
Did they?
With Olga.
Did they not understand what these women did to the people that tried to hurt them? These women knew how to fight.
Yeah, they would beat your butt.
It's a warrior culture.
The Drevlians sent a marital delegation.
Did the delegation announce the deceased husband as well? We bring bad tidings. Your husband is dead. But good news. Would you like to get married again?
So not extremely clear, but she says, my husband will not rise from the dead. And you can take the inflection as you will.
Ooh.
She had all 20 of this delegation bury alive.
I can't believe she didn't do the little tree maneuver.
It's a waste of lumber.
Yeah.
Later, they didn't hear from her, and they were like, I wonder if she's just not sure.
She's still in mourning. She needs another month. That was kind of them to give time.
So there was a second delegation sent. They were dignitaries, and she lured them into a bathhouse.
Because everything happens in a bathhouse.
And locked the door.
Oh.
And burned it down.
Arson.
And then,
I like how she's changing up her methods.
Yes, this serial killer is not a one-trick pony. She's creative.
Yeah.
Picture it if you will.
I will.
A grand feast. Over 5,000 people there. And they were like, hey, we just really appreciate you coming and asking so kindly for Princess Olga's hand, blah, blah, blah. Got them absolutely schnockered with a lot of wine and wiped out all 5,000 of them.
Oh my god. So she kills the first envoy by burying them alive.
20.
And she kills the second ones.
Undetermined
amount by the arson. And then they send 5,000 more? Did no one go find out what happened to the first two groups?
No.
I would not keep sending people if no one returned.
Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. But what about third time?
You deserve what you get.
She then leads a conquering army into the Drevlian capital. The starving population had no tribute to pay for her, and so she was pretty brutal and razed the city to the ground, completely burned it down.
Whoops. Now they'll definitely be able to pay.
Yeah. And that's the information that I have of the destruction of the Drevlians.
What happened to Prince Maul?
It literally doesn't even say.
What happened to him?
Mm-hmm. He does not even have a Wikipedia page.
That's not good.
Mm-mm.
Wow, there's nothing.
Erased from history.
That's rough. The last contemporary mention of the Drevlians occurred in a chronicle of 1136. She erased him from history.
Yeah. Because we don't know how he died.
I mean, I think we know that it wasn't.
It wasn't good.
For instance, I'm looking here and I see a lovely sketch, Olga's revenge for the assassination of her husband. And Olga is watching as these people burn alive.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks like she's having a meditative moment watching these people burn.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that the first killing Olga's husband was not smart. But I can see that they were like, we're not going to be subjugated. We are not going to be a part of your empire.
No.
Then sending the emissaries and saying, hey, will you marry me, was probably not very intelligent. Kind of dumb to assume that she would be willing to give you her land after you murdered her husband.
Yeah.
But here's the real thing. When the first group doesn't come back, don't send a second one without some messengers going back and forth. And then really don't go for the third one.
Yeah. Third time in this case is not a charm.
Dum 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 dum.
And that, my friends, is that.
We hope that you have a brighter and smarter day than these 5 men.
Oh, and they are. They are all men.
And generally steer clear of vindictive women with a lot of power and military might. I'm Caroline.
And I'm Erica. And we are pithily yours.
This episode is brought to you by the Pithy Chronicle, LLC. The Pithy Chronicle is intended for education, entertainment, and non-commercial purposes. Any views or opinions expressed in this podcast are personal and do not represent those of people, institutions, or organizations that the owner may or may not be associated with in a professional or personal capacity. While we offer lots of sarcasm, this podcast does not offer any advice or services. Listen